broadcasting platform I'm using to do this. It's a multimedia system that allows me to broadcast out to a whole bunch of other social media sites. But as usual, the best way to engage with this is to join via HAPS itself using the link at the top. But it will be going out to Facebook and Twitter and, well, YouTube if YouTube is behaving today, but YouTube seems to be having a bit of a disagreement with HAPS these days and disconnecting itself. But if it's working, it's working. And as I said, this is sort of the final broadcast in a sequence I've been doing for a project called 30 Days Wild. 30 Days Wild is a little initiative run by the wildlife trusts here in the United Kingdom, and it's an activity that encourages people just to every day in June go out and do random acts of wildness, go out and do something to engage with the natural world around you. They send out suggestions for particular things to do on particular days, but I've just been doing my own thing, and of course you can do that, you've got to do something. I've been doing a sequence of broadcasts, or at least content here on HAPS, every day of that 30 days, which has been the project. So this is the final day, day 30 of 30 Days Wild. And the first day for 30 Days Wild, the first day of the project, I'm a bit backlit, Fiona, but the most interesting thing is probably not me, but the meadow, which is the main screen. Yes, could I rearrange this so I'm slightly less backlit? I could try turning around a bit. I'm still likely to be backlit because I'm outdoors and the sky is brighter than my face. Anyway, so this is the 30th day of 30 Days Wild, and I thought I'd end it back where we began. So day one, in the morning of the 1st of June, I was down here in Perivale Wood, and we were having a breakfast. Big wild breakfast was the idea. You would start by having breakfast somewhere wild to start the month off. So I thought, well, why don't I finish the month off by coming down here and having a cup of tea and a snack and just generally sitting around. So I will do that. I hope I have a scone. Sadly, I don't have a scone. I've got biscuits and stuff like that. So where am I? I'm at Perivale Wood. I'll just put a bit of thing on screen about what Perivale Wood is. And Perivale Wood is a nature reserve that is run by an organisation called the Selborne Society. The majority of it, as the name might suggest, from woodland, is ancient woodland, 18 acres of that, but there are areas of pasture and meadowland, and the main camera is looking up one of those meadows as we speak. And we've been monitoring wildlife here for quite a while, so I've just stuck up on the screen a summary of some of the stuff we've seen. Slightly out of date for some of them. I think we've got about another 10 or so moth species since this list was produced, but quite a range of things that we've seen, and it's all rather impressive and rather good. And yeah, it's run by an organisation called the Selborne Society. The Selborne Society is a charity of which I'm chair that looks after this bit of woodland and this bit of paddocks and these meadows. So I'm just going to sit here and have a chat and have a cup of tea. So I'll occasionally stop talking and drink my cup of tea. And throughout 30 Days Wild, I've done a variety of things, mainly focused on perhaps things I find interesting. I tend to particularly study Lepidoptera, look at moths and butterflies. Also interested in birds. And things we've done during this week, we've certainly had some walks through the meadows looking for butterflies, have some walks looking at that. We've looked at the results of some moth traps that I've run. We've looked at some plants, and we've had a few general walks around the area. We seem to be having slightly better weather now. It's getting a little bit warmer. The start of the month was still rather poor and cold for some of it. But you probably have heard me comment in a few of these broadcasts over the month that some of the things we've been looking for, some of the insects we've been looking for, certainly numbers seem to have been way down on a normal year. And we attribute that, I think, just to the fact we had a very cold start to 2021 here in the UK. And really, we're still having a somewhat colder than usual summer now, I would say. Had a few nice days, but seem to be here in the UK and here in Western Europe having rather a cold year, and that seems to be holding back the numbers of the butterflies, moths, and other insects. So I've got a camera out there looking up the meadow. Maybe we'll see something flying through the meadow. It's I can sort of see that way, so I can see with my naked eye looking where it is. There's a couple of herring gulls flying at the back, but they're probably slightly smaller than 1 pixel on the screen, so not going to show much, unfortunately. But keep an eye out, and there'll be, I'm sure, butterflies flying through the grasses and things like that. The other thing I've talked about on a few of these broadcasts during this month is the importance of people sharing their wildlife records if they are out there recording stuff. It's nice to see something, but if you just keep that to yourself, it doesn't really make a big deal to anyone. Whereas if you let people know, that data can be used. There's a magpie flying across the paddock. You might just be able to see that in camera. I couldn't see it on my screen, so it presumably showed up. But when you observe something, certainly here in the UK, for nearly every group of organisms, there is a recording scheme. There is a group of people out there, so as a single individual for some of the more obscure groups, but who collect and collate the data on what's been seen and when and where. So if you can, submit data to those schemes, let the people who manage the sites you visit know what you've seen. And the value of that recording, the value of having all that data, making sure you submit stuff, is we know a lot about our flora and fauna here in the UK. We know a lot about what is where, and that means we can say a lot about what needs to be done to conserve things. And I know, records I've collected have contributed to various national recording schemes over the years, all added value. And yes, this site in particular has been recording for quite a long time. The site's been managed as a nature reserve for well over 100 years now, and people have been variously going out and recording what they've seen during that time. And you can see some of the list again, should be appearing on screen, or maybe on screen now. And we've got some quite decent lists for a suburban site in London. The site was originally designated for birds. It was originally described as a bird sanctuary. That was the group of organisms that people were particularly interested in looking after. Over the years, there's certainly been quite a change in what's there. So you go back to our old records of birds in this site, for instance, and there were species like spotted flycatcher and willow tit routinely breeding here. Neither both of those would be very good records these days. Spotted flycatcher might occur on passage, one might migrate through, but they certainly don't breed. And willow tit would be an exceptional bird if we saw one of those here. So they've disappeared, and we know they've disappeared because people have been doing that recording here. At the same time, other species have arrived. So you've probably heard shouting overhead, rose-ringed parakeets. They're a species that was accidentally introduced to Britain and it's really expanded its population. And we get them all the time now. As well as that recording, just going and seeing what's there and letting people know. We do various forms of more systematic recording here. Even the casual data can provide some really useful information. So I wouldn't for 1 minute dismiss that. It's highly useful stuff, and some very clever statistical techniques can be applied now to try and extract information about population trends from data that's gathered in a very non-systematic way. But in addition to that, we do some more systematic recording here. One of the methods I do is something referred to as a butterfly transect, and that's a survey. I did do a broadcast on this early in the year on HAPS, just taking people around the route. But that's a particular way of surveying for butterflies and moths and dragonflies and a few other flying insects as well. And effectively what it does is it controls the observer effort. So you walk a fixed route, you record things in a fixed dimension box around yourself. You do it during certain hours of the day, between 10 and 3. You do it if all weather conditions are within a certain range, so above 16 degrees centigrade with some sunshine. Although that can be varied, you do record the weather data to allow control for that. And what that means is that there's much less variation in what's being observed coming from how observant the person's been or how much time they spent out. It's all much more controlled. And that means you can draw much more robust conclusions about population trends. So I do those surveys once a week at least between April and September. And I do one of those here, and that means again we've got some useful data on the trends in our butterfly species. But our botanists also try to do some more systematic surveying, and there's a few botanical methods. One method is a quadrat method, so you randomly select a 1 meter square of several 1 meter squares, so you would throw something randomly into that paddock that you can see on the camera, and you would go and identify the plants in the 1 meter square, and you'd do a few of them, and then you can extrapolate from that. If it's probably random, you can extrapolate to what the whole meadow might have in it, population levels. And Nick, who's one of our main botanists here, has also made sure we've got on the site various fixed marker posts. And again, that just helps systematise, particularly botanical recording, where you might want to record the location of a plant to, really quite precise levels of detail, the nearest meter or so. So because we've got these fixed points and they've been here for years and years and years, you can know pretty accurately where a plant was seen by saying it was, 1 meter north of post 56. You can go back and check that precise spot. For bird surveying, another area we can survey, we have a colleague, Phil, who has the relevant training and the relevant license to be able to capture birds and to examine them in the nest. And what that allows him to do is to get the bird, record various bits of data about them, their size, their age, how their moult is going, all of those things. And also, quite critically, to attach to their leg a small, very lightweight metal ring with a unique number on it. And what that means is if the bird is captured again, either here or elsewhere, if it's found dead, or if, in the case of some of them, if you manage to observe and read those rings in the field through binoculars, we'll be able to learn something about that bird's movements, about its longevity, about where it is. And again, that's another way that we here gather lots of useful data and lots of information about another aspect of the wildlife here in Perryvale Wood. So I'm coming to the end of my cup of tea, so I'll probably come to the end of the broadcast quite soon. But it's just been interesting this month to force myself to get out and put something out onto here on the Haps for every day of 30 Days Wild. Quite a lot of it down here in Perryvale Wood, which is one of my favourite places. But that really takes us to the end of day 30. So 30 Days Wild, 30 days of doing something every day to engage with the natural world. I finished my cup of tea and just leave this running for a minute whilst various things display. But yes, back here at Perryvale Wood, this won't be the last of the broadcasts that I'll do. I mean, I was using Haps before this, I'll continue using it afterwards, but probably revert back to something closer to approximately once a week, or when I see something interesting that I feel I'd like to share with the world. Next broadcast is likely to be sometime on Saturday. I'm running another moth survey down here on Friday night, and what I'm trying to do this year is to show the moths from those surveys, or at least show some of them here on Haps, particularly when we can't all get together. Various people who often join me at these things, Fiona is one of them, who's here in the comments. share some of the things we've got. And it seems to be, conditions seem to be improving. I'm kind of hopeful we're going to get some more interesting species now than some of the earlier sessions. Certainly the trap I ran last weekend for a public event, which I did briefly do a HAPS broadcast on some of the moths, had some interesting species, had a species that we don't get very often, the dotted fanfoot. So with any luck, this weekend we'll produce even more exciting stuff. But with that, I am going to sign off on the final day. Fiona's asking a question. I'm going to sign off and then Fiona asks a question. I have white letter hair streak. So WLH, for those who don't know, is white letter hair streak. It's a canopy dwelling species of butterfly. And at the weekend on Sunday, I led a walk for a variety of organisations, Butterfly Conservation, Friends of Horsenden Hill, Ealing Wildlife Group, to look for this species. It was a terrible day in terms of weather. It was dull, it was grey, it drizzled, but we managed to get a few. We got 2 or 3. We managed, everybody at least saw them, although they were quite distant, fleeting views around the canopy. But we got the species. The population has made it through another year. The in-person walk has again kept its unbroken record of never failing to find white letter hair streak, regardless of how rubbish the weather is. Hopefully, if I find some that are down and more displayable, I'll put them on HAPS. But for now, I'm going to sign off now, and I will perhaps see some of you at some point virtually on Saturday as we have a look at some of the moths from the traps. So, good afternoon, and this is the end of 30 Days Wild.